collapse of KKR's rescue deal isn't a blip, it's a reckoning. A moment that exposes the complete bankruptcy of the privatised water model. This morning's interim Cunliffe review into the water sector confirms the scale of the crisis. It describes our water system, a regulated statutory monopoly, as now too risky for investors. Too risky. But it didn't seem too risky when shareholders were siphoning off billions in dividends while letting the pipes rot, the rivers choke and the debt pile up. The only people truly at risk now are bill payers who face a 35% real terms price hike in the next 5 years, not just to fund clean water or climate resilience, but half of which is to boost investor returns. So, I ask my honourable friend again, when will the government stop fiddling, put Thames Water in special administration, strip out the debt and begin the job of returning our water system, not just Thames, back into public ownership?
Mr Lewis, I was very grateful in bringing you on early, but I didn't expect you to make the statement yourself. Secretary of State.
Thank my honourable friend for his question. Reassure him. The government stands ready for any eventuality and will take action as required. We are not looking at nationalisation because it would cost over £100 billion of public money that would have to be taken away from other public services like the National Health Service to be given to the owners of the water companies. It would take years to unpick the current model of ownership, during which time pollution would get worse, and we know that nationalisation is not the answer. You only have to look at the situation in Scotland to see that.
Democrat spokesperson Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Under the Conservative...
Clive F.
Mr Speaker, only the Conservatives could come here and defend Thames Water. The rest of the country, has seen what an appalling performance this company has had in 35 years of privatisation. Can my right honourable friend say it's time, I think, we've got to put this company out of its misery? But we've got to do so in a way that doesn't bring the debts that they've run up onto the taxpayer or the bill payers. So can my right honourable friend say that one of his options is preparing for that eventuality?
Secretary of State.
Thank my honourable friend for his question. We are prepared for every eventuality, as I have already outlined, and we will take whatever action is necessary to ensure the continuing supply of water to customers in the Thames region and elsewhere.
The reality is that Thames Water is bankrupt. It cannot pay its debts and it cannot meet its legal obligations to Ofwat, to the state and to its customers. And therefore, surely the right thing to do, Mr Speaker, is actually to put it out of its misery, put it into special administration for £1. The shareholders and the debt holders know, caveat emptor, they've all blown their dough. Buy it for £1, it's a good deal for the taxpayer, then it won't have to pay huge egregious rates of interest, and the taxpayer and the customers will be the beneficiaries.
Secretary of State.
Well, I would respectfully point out to the honourable gentleman that Reform cares so much about the problems facing our water system that they didn't even mention it once in their general election manifesto. And what he's proposing, nationalising the water sector, would cost in excess of £100 billion. That is money they would have to take away from services like the National Health Service that his constituents rely on, and I think they would be very ill-served by him if he were to take that funding away and push up waiting lists that we've just started seeing coming down as a result of this government's investment.
The Green Party has campaigned for public ownership of water since the year dot, unlike certain cynical opportunists on the bench behind me, because we know that if you allow privatised monopolies to control our water, it's left infrastructure crumbling, waterways running with sewage, sky-high bills and shareholders laughing all the way to the bank. So can I ask the Secretary of State, given this obscene and fundamental failure, why is it that the government will not even consider bringing water back into public hands where it belongs?
The problems facing the water sector are to do with failures of governance and regulation, and we need to tackle the actual problems, not the imagined ones. If we were to seek to nationalise the water sector, it would cost in excess of £100 billion that would have to be taken away from services like the National Health Service or education. It would take years to unpick the current model of ownership, during which time there would be no investment and water pollution would get worse. And we know from the example example of Scotland that nationalisation is not the answer, because they also have problems with pollution. We are going to make sure that our priority is pure water, not the purity of her ideology.
The Secretary's reluctance to entertain public ownership, but I'd like to draw his attention to research from the University of Greenwich which showed that bringing water into public ownership would pay for itself within about 7 years, and after that it would save the public purse up to £2.5 billion a year. So is the Secretary aware that by immediately bringing Thames Water into special administration and permanent public ownership, it would cut the company's massive debt mountain in half, stop the payment of huge dividends and debt payments into the future, and within just several years would actually start turning a profit for the people of this country?
So state.
Well, I beg to slightly correct her. Special administration is not nationalisation, and nationalisation would cost in excess of £100 billion, money that we'd have to take away from other public services in order to hand to the bosses of the water companies who caused this mess in the first place. I do not think taxpayers would welcome that.
Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find the response from the Secretary of State deeply depressing when he says that somehow or other there's a market solution there for Thames Water. We've had 35 years of excessive profits, pollution, and we've had 35 years of rising bills as well. He knows at some point he's going to have to take Thames Water into public ownership. And instead of quoting this strange figure of £100 billion in compensation, surely if we took it into public ownership, Parliament would set the price on which we would purchase the company, taking into account excessive profits, pollution, damage, and the destruction of so many people's lives by the way in which Thames Water has behaved. Can't he be tough with it for once and say that water is a human right and it should be publicly owned and publicly run? So state.
Water is indeed a human right, and that is why this government is taking every step that we need to take in order to sort out the broken water system that we inherited from the previous government.
My constituent Bruno lives in Charlton and Knockmore, and when it rains heavily, sewage flows into his garden within sight of a pumping station that fails every single time. 1/3 of Bruno and other Thames Water's bills is currently used to service the debt of that company. That money should instead be going towards investing and improving his pumping station and others. So why will the Secretary of State not recognise that Thames is financially unviable, bring it into special administration, write down the debt and ensure that the future company serves the public interest?
I mean, he points with a very graphic example to what happens when we have the scale of regulatory failure that we had untroubled under the previous government. That is why Sir John Cunliffe has brought forward his report today, which I hope he will read, and I hope he will provide feedback to Sir John, because he's asking for that ahead of his final report in a month's time. But I would also remind the honourable gentleman the government has helped to secure £104 billion of private sector investment at the conclusion of the previous price review period. That money will be spent to upgrade exactly the kind of facilities that he is pointing to that are letting down his constituents, mine and everyone else's in the House.